Reptiles are far more tuned into the people around them than most people realize. Some learn their keepers so well that a stranger gets a frozen stare while you get the full head tilt greeting. Because reptiles lack the expressive faces and wagging tails we associate with recognition in mammals. Most owners have to learn an entirely new vocabulary of body language before they even notice it is happening. Once you know what to look for, though, the pattern shows up again and again across wildly different species. If you like the idea of a cold-blooded animal treating you like a warm-blooded friend, subscribe so I can feed my colony, and let's get right into 12 reptiles that recognize their owners. A bearded dragon looks like it was built from spare dinosaur parts. Yet a settled adult can become surprisingly locked onto one person. Many keepers report that their beardy wakes up, climbs the glass, and does the slow head bob the moment they walk into the room. The same lizard may flatten its body and dash for cover around an unfamiliar visitor. There are no controlled experiments proving that bearded dragons memorize a human face specifically, but research on reptile cognition has shown that lizards can learn to distinguish between individual handlers using a combination of visual and vibrational cues. A beardy also has months to connect your silhouette with the exact spot where the salad bowl appears. Confidence matters here too. A newly rehomed dragon may glass surf away from everyone, but once it feels secure, it stops treating your hand like an incoming hawk and starts basking directly beneath it instead. Leopard geckos bring a quieter version of the same recognition. They are not glass surfers by nature, so their attention shows up as stillness rather than excitement. A settled Leo may stay perfectly relaxed while its regular keeper opens the enclosure, then vanish under the hide the second an unfamiliar hand reaches in. Leopard geckos rely heavily on scent and vibration, so part of what looks like recognition may actually be a smell profile built up over months of handling. That does not make it less real. The gecko is still building a working model of who you are. It is simply using a different sensory channel than a mammal would. Owners often notice their Leo licking the air near a familiar hand, while it stays completely still near a stranger's, almost like it is double-checking the paperwork before deciding you are not a threat. Ball pythons have a reputation for being shy, calm, and about as expressive as a coiled shoelace, yet keepers insist their snake behaves differently depending on who is holding it. A ball python that tenses and balls up for a stranger may stay loose and exploratory when its regular keeper picks it up. Snakes lack the facial muscles for expression, so any recognition has to show up through body tension, tongue-flicking rate, and how quickly the animal settles. Research on snake cognition is limited compared to lizards, but studies do show that snakes can learn to associate specific cues with safety or reward. A ball python is not going to greet you at the door, but it may stop treating your sleeve like a potential threat and start treating it like a warm log with good balance. Blue-tongued skinks are where this list starts getting genuinely dog-like. These lizards are famously food-motivated and famously bold, and that combination makes recognition obvious fast. A blue tongue that hears its regular keeper's footsteps may emerge from its hide and start walking toward the front of the enclosure before the lid even opens. Skinks have decent visual acuity and strong memory for routine, and many owners describe their skink following a finger along the glass, the same way a fish follows a hand across a tank. Strangers tend to get a flattened body, a wide open mouth, and that unmistakable blue tongue flashed as a warning. Your blue tongue skink is not being dramatic for no reason. It has simply decided you are not on the approved visitor list yet. Argentine tegus take reptile recognition to a level that surprises people who assume all lizards are basically the same animal. Tegus are intelligent, trainable, and often compared to dogs by the people who keep them, right down to the way some of them learn to respond to their own name. A tegu that is bonded with its keeper may approach calmly, tolerate handling, and even show something close to excitement when a specific person enters the room, tail wagging included. The same animal can be genuinely defensive towards strangers, hissing or whipping its tail as a warning. Tegus have been the subject of some of the more promising cognition research among lizards. including studies suggesting they can learn maze tasks and respond to novel problems in ways closer to mammals than most reptiles. That research supports the idea that a tegu recognizing its owner is not just wishful thinking from an enthusiastic keeper, and it may help explain why so many tegu owners describe their animal as having a genuine personality rather than a fixed set of instincts. Corn snakes are a lot like ball pythons in temperament, but tend to be more active, which makes their behavior easier to read. A corn snake accustomed to one keeper may explore confidently across a familiar hand, while pulling back and testing the air more cautiously with someone new. Corn snakes rely on chemical cues picked up through their tongue, so a large part of what looks like recognition is really scent memory built from repeated handling. Keepers often notice their corn snake calming down faster during regular handling sessions compared to the tense minutes that follow being picked up by a stranger. The snake is not thinking about you specifically the way a dog would, but it has built an association between your scent and safety, and that association is doing a lot of quiet work. Red-eared sliders and other pond turtles turn out to be surprisingly social once you know what to look for. A slider that recognizes its keeper may swim straight to the surface, paddle toward the edge of the tank, and beg at the glass the moment a familiar shape appears nearby. The same turtle can stay submerged and cautious around an unfamiliar visitor standing in the exact same spot. Turtles have reasonably good vision and long memories for locations and routines, and aquatic turtles in particular seem to link a person's outline with the arrival of food far more strongly than land tortoises do. Some keepers have trained their sliders to come when tapped on the glass, which suggests these turtles are tracking specific signals rather than just reacting to general movement in the room. Russian tortoises move at their own pace, but that slowness hides a surprising amount of pattern recognition. A tortoise that has lived with the same keeper for a year or more may begin walking toward the front of its enclosure the moment that person's shadow crosses the doorway. Tortoises are known for strong spatial memory, and some research has shown they can learn and remember maze routes for extended periods, which suggests the underlying memory system is capable of more than instinct alone. Strangers tend to get the classic shell retreat, while a familiar keeper might get an outstretched neck and an expectant stare. It is not enthusiasm in the mammalian sense, but a tortoise that stops hiding and starts approaching has clearly filed you under a different category than everyone else who walks past. Crested geckos live most of their lives at night, so their recognition shows up in subtler ways than a dramatic daytime greeting. A settled crestie may sit calmly on a familiar hand, licking its eye and exploring at a relaxed pace, while it freezes or leaps away from an unfamiliar one. These geckos rely heavily on scent and touch, and repeated gentle handling appears to lower their stress response specifically around the person doing the handling. Crested geckos also seem to associate certain container shapes or hand movements with feeding time, which is why some keepers can get their gecko to walk directly onto an open palm the moment it appears near the enclosure. That is a learned routine built entirely around one specific person's habits. Green iguanas have a reputation for being difficult, and part of that reputation exists because iguanas form genuinely strong preferences for specific people. An iguana that trusts its keeper may allow petting along the jaw and dewlap, an area most iguanas guard closely, while the same lizard can become aggressive or defensive towards someone it does not know. Iguanas have good color vision and appear to use visual cues alongside scent to identify familiar handlers. Keepers of large adult iguanas frequently describe a near-total behavioral shift depending on who enters the room. Calm and cooperative for one person, tense and ready to whip its tail for someone new. That contrast is one of the clearest owner recognition signals on this entire list. Savanna monitors bring serious intelligence into the mix, and monitor lizards as a group are considered among the smartest reptiles kept as pets. A savanna monitor raised with regular, gentle handling by one primary keeper keeper often becomes remarkably tolerant with that specific person, tongue flicking calmly during handling instead of hissing or thrashing. Some keepers describe their monitor approaching the enclosure door and waiting when it hears familiar footsteps, a behavior that looks a great deal like anticipation. Research on monitor lizard cognition has found they are capable of counting small numbers of food items and adjusting their behavior based on past outcomes, which makes it very plausible that a monitor is also tracking who has been reliable and who has not. Owners of full-grown savanna monitors, animals large enough to genuinely intimidate a stranger, frequently describe a night and day difference between the calm, food-anticipating creature that greets them and the defensive, tail-whipping animal that meets someone new. Box turtles round out the list with a slow but genuine version of recognition. A box turtle kept by the same person for years may emerge from its shell and walk toward a familiar keeper while staying tucked away for a stranger standing in the same spot. Box turtles have long lifespans and correspondingly long memories, with some individuals outliving several generations of their keeper's family and still showing a clear preference for whichever person has handled their daily care the longest. Owners often notice their box turtle becoming more active and food-motivated, specifically when its regular caretaker is nearby, a shift that is hard to explain as pure coincidence once you have watched it happen across hundreds of feedings. Some longtime keepers even describe their box turtle learning to associate a particular pair of shoes or a particular time of day with that one person's arrival, which suggests the recognition is built from a whole bundle of overlapping cues rather than any single sense doing all the work. Chameleons are the reptile most people assume are incapable of any social awareness at all, and for years, that assumption went mostly unchallenged. Chameleons are solitary, easily stressed, and famous for eyes that swivel independently, which makes them look permanently distracted. Even so, keepers of veiled and panther chameleons consistently describe a difference in how their animal reacts to a familiar hand versus an unfamiliar one. A chameleon accustomed to one keeper may hold its color steady and walk calmly onto an offered arm, while the same animal darkens, hisses, or gapes at a stranger reaching toward the same branch. Chameleons rely almost entirely on vision, with each eye able to track independently before both lock forward on something interesting, and a familiar shape approaching at a familiar angle appears to register very differently than a new one. Because chameleons are so easily stressed, this kind of trust takes far longer to build than with most lizards on this list, which makes the eventual outcome feel more earned than automatic. Uromastyx, the spiny-tailed lizards, sometimes called dab lizards, are stubborn enough that any sign of recognition tends to stand out. A Uromastyx that trusts its keeper may bask calmly on an outstretched hand or wait near the front of its enclosure for greens to appear, while it whips its heavily armored tail as a warning toward anyone else who gets too close too fast. These lizards are strongly food-motivated and highly routine-driven, which means much of what looks like recognition is really a very precise internal clock paired with a specific person's schedule and scent. Owners who feed at consistent times report their Uromastyx becoming noticeably more animated in the minutes before that person is due to arrive, which suggests the lizard is tracking more than just the sight of food appearing. Bearded dragons already made this list, but their close relative, the Aki monitor, deserves its own mention as one of the more underrated pet reptiles for owner recognition. Akis are small, fast, and intensely curious monitor lizards, and keepers who handle them regularly describe an almost dog-like eagerness in animals that trust their primary caretaker. An Aki monitor that recognizes its keeper may dig its way out of substrate and approach the front of the enclosure the moment a familiar shadow appears above the tank, tongue flicking rapidly the entire way. The same lizard can stay buried and cautious for a stranger standing in the exact same spot. Monitor lizards as a family show some of the strongest cognitive test results among reptiles, and Akis in particular have been described by researchers and keepers alike as capable of learning names, targets, and routines with a speed that rivals small mammals. Chinese water dragons bring a jumpier, more reactive energy to this list than most of the lizards already mentioned, and that jumpiness makes their recognition easier to spot rather than harder. A water dragon that has bonded with one keeper may stay perched calmly on a branch while that person moves around the enclosure, only to launch into a full panicked scramble for the water dish when an unfamiliar hand reaches in from the same angle. These lizards startle easily by nature, so the fact that a familiar keeper can move quickly near a settled water dragon without triggering that same flight response says something about how specifically the animal has learned to separate one person's movements from everyone else's. Water dragons also tend to calm down faster after being startled by their regular keeper than after being startled by a stranger, recovering their basking posture within seconds instead of staying rigid and alert for several minutes. That faster recovery time is one of the more measurable, if informal, signs of trust across the whole reptile world. Reptiles notice far more than people assume. They are definitely not the blank instinct-only animals that a lot of people unfortunately still believe them to be. Cold blood does not mean a cold personality. It just means the personality shows up on a different time scale than we are used to reading. If you want to see more animals that quietly keep track of the people around them, check out a video on screen. I'm Mark Gills, and I'll see you in the next one.